urban central area. In 2014, Poverty Point was officially listed as a World Heritage Site, making it one of only 4 US prehistoric sites on that list, something we're very proud of, those of us that work down in the lower valley. The large mound has been known for a very long time, of course. It's very easy to see on the landscape. But the true extent of Poverty Point was first recognized when this aerial photograph revealed the incredible ridge structure defining the central plaza. No one had ever noticed that these were here until they saw this photograph. The outer ridge that you can see on there is about 3/4 of a mile in diameter, and the site overall covers over 500 acres. Excavation in the ridges have revealed that Poverty Point people lived on top of them, as they're filled with intact house floors, food remains, hearths, and innumerable small baked clay objects like these. Though very enigmatic at first, we now believe that these so-called Poverty Point objects, and I realize we weren't very creative in our name, were used as boiling stones during the cooking process in an area where stone was relatively hard to come by. The large mound at Poverty Point has likewise attracted a great deal of archaeological attention. Since early in its history, it has been described as a bird-shaped mound, and it consists of a tall area attached via a ramp to a larger, lower platform. It's the second largest earthen construction in the Americas, and it stands over 70 feet tall, covers an area equivalent to about 8 football fields, and contains 17,000 dump trucks worth of fill, just to give you an idea of how big this thing is. I wish I had a picture with people standing in it. The people would be barely visible on the top up there. Recent excavations into this mound have shown that the entire thing was built very quickly, likely in a matter of days. This rapid construction would have required, of course, a huge number of people putting forth a massive amount of communal labor. So what was Poverty Point? We have evidence of structures, but not nearly enough of them to house the population necessary to build this huge of a mound. Moreover, there's still no evidence of agriculture or political leadership. The clues to answering these questions lay in the material culture of the site itself, and here are a few examples. The collections from Poverty Point contain some of the most beautiful and exquisitely made stone artifacts in America, and here are a few examples of jasper and green stone beads, and then over closer to me is a hematite plummet or a net weight. Not only does the skill necessary to create such objects suggest the presence of specialized artisans, but the raw materials present at the site suggest an incredible amount of long-distance trade, bringing these stone materials into Poverty Point. The Poverty Point exchange network spanned from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians and from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast, and it focused largely on high-quality stone material. Based on this understanding, the site of Poverty Point is now thought of as a trade and craft production center. Though a small number of artisans may have lived more or less permanently on those ridges, people living around the various non-mound sites scattered all across the lower Mississippi Valley would likely have gathered periodically at Poverty Point to take part in this trade network and also to build the mounds, while of course conducting more mundane but necessary social activities such as arranging marriages, reinforcing kin ties, and forging alliances with other groups. Over time, these gatherings would imbue the place with social and perhaps even supernatural power, making the occasional pilgrimage back even more important. So this type of large-scale communal aggregation does not appear again in North American prehistory until around the year AD 1, when something called the Hopewell Interaction Sphere develops. Centered in Ohio, this trade network spanned over 2,000 miles and supplied raw material for some of the most spectacular artifacts in North American prehistory, including these elaborately incised ceramic vessels, beautiful stone tools, incredibly detailed carved stone pipes. The one on the left up there actually has bone teeth and pearl eyes. Dramatic mica cutouts, and embossed copper decorative pieces. So though the mounds at Hopewell sites themselves look fairly similar to the small dome-shaped mounds found at earlier sites, they were used in a very different way. Unlike the other sites that we've discussed so far, Watson Brake and Poverty Point, the incredible artifacts that I just showed you are primarily found with burials that were carefully placed inside Hopewell mounds. Most mounds contained numerous individuals. You can see sort of a diorama of one of these mounds here. And some graves were much richer than others, perhaps indicating that people either earned differential status during their lifetimes or served different social roles that were worth respecting through death. Hopewell mounds exist in association with incredibly complex geometric earthworks, and here are a few pictures of those. The earthen embankments that make up these elaborate designs range from 5 to 8 feet in height, and the picture up here in the corner closest to me is showing me standing on top of one of these earthen embankments. And of course, as you can see, they're impressive from the ground, but it's difficult to ascertain their patterning. From the air, however, that you can easily see that the earthworks are in regular geometric shapes, including octagons, rectangles, squares, circles, and what in American archaeology we have begun to affectionately call squircles, falls somewhere between a square and a circle. We weren't sure what to call it. These images in particular that are up here right now are parts of the Newark earthworks in Heath County, Ohio, and I've chosen to show you this site particularly because the earthworks themselves are incredibly well preserved, and that is because they are on a modern golf course. Not the typical way of preserving an archaeological site, but it's worked wonders for Newark. That said, only a small portion of the site is this well protected. Only a small portion is on the golf course. The site was in fact much larger, as indicated on this map drawn by Squire and Davis in the 1840s. You saw the octagon up there in the top left corner and this circle down here. The rest of the site has been largely destroyed. This image shows an elaborate layout, including a variety of large earthen embankments, as well as small circular monuments, which are the teeny circles surrounding it, small conical burial mounds, which are the ones drawn with just little hash marks instead of solid lines, and these long, narrow causeways, the longest of which runs through the middle of the site there and is over 2.5 miles long. So again, we can ask the question, what were these sites and how did they function within Hopewell society? In answering this, it's necessary to take a slightly broader look. So we're gonna zoom out here and look at the Scioto River Valley in general. The town that's drawn up there is the modern town of Chillicothe, Ohio, and Newark is visible on the far side of the river closest to me. Within the Scioto River Valley in southern Ohio, Squire and Davis mapped approximately 20 large earthwork complexes, and they hypothesized that at the time that they were mapping, many more had already been destroyed. They further hypothesized that many of these sites may have been linked by long causeways like those found at Newark, but that agricultural activity in the area would have quickly erased them from the landscape entirely. This incredible concentration of elaborate mound sites connected by monumental causeways suggests that the Scioto River Valley was a location of great ritual significance to Hopewell people, and the incredible number of ceremonial objects associated with these sites supports this conclusion, and here again are a few examples. In particular, certain objects that were placed with burials suggest that the individuals interred at these sites were afforded special treatment in death due to their social role in life. So certain objects such as this carved human figure wearing a bear skin up at the top, or these 2 copper headdresses that are down at the bottom, suggest that individuals played a shamanic role in society. Shamanic individuals would have been people thought to have the ability to communicate with animals and to mediate between the upper and lower worlds, or the human and the spirit worlds that existed beneath and above them. As such important ritual figures, shamans were deserving of great respect, and that is shown through their elaborate burial at these Ohio Hopewell earthworks. So around AD 500, the construction of elaborate geometric earthworks, the wide trade network, and the elaborate burials that characterized Hopewell society ceased. We believe that this moment reflects a change in the social organization of people living in and around the Mississippi Valley. These are just a couple images of the shamans that these people might have recognized. These changes would have been closely related to shifts in population size, technological innovations such as the development of the bow and arrow, and increasing importance of agricultural subsistence, as well as changes in intergroup relationships. But despite all these hypotheses, precisely what happened to end Hopewell society and why are questions that are still hotly debated within American archaeology. Because of this so-called collapse, the period that followed Hopewell has long been ignored, being set aside as a, quote, slightly murky interval between two great cultural fluorescences. However, in my opinion, incredibly interesting mound building cultures flourished during this interval, and I would like to talk about just one of them today. So for this, we're going to look further north in the Mississippi Valley to the area encompassed by southern Wisconsin and neighboring areas in Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota. This region was home to a population that built huge numbers of mounds from approximately AD 600 to AD 1000. And though conical mounds continue to be built in large numbers, many of the mounds constructed during this time were effigies. They were built in a variety of animal shapes, including, but certainly not limited to, birds, bears, panthers, lizards, turtles, and human beings. Many of the same creatures that played important roles in the symbolism of Hopewell people, the same creatures that you saw symbolized in those Hopewell artifacts, obviously played important roles in these people's lives as well, as they were being made out of earth rather than out of stone or shell or ceramic. We've been able to estimate that there were over 20,000 mounds constructed in this region during the effigy mound time period, and about 4,000 of them still exist today in small parks across the northern Midwest. I went to undergraduate school in southern Wisconsin, and we actually had a turtle effigy mound on my campus. The largest of these remaining effigy mounds is near Muskota, Wisconsin, and it represents a bird with a wingspan over a quarter mile in length, just to give you an idea of the scale. A great number of these mounds are now preserved at Effigy Mounds National Monument in Iowa. Overall, the park preserves 206 mounds in a few large clusters. The largest cluster includes at least 116 mounds along the banks of the Mississippi River and represents the largest group of mounds in one location in all of North America, and that's what's being depicted in the bottom picture here. The mounds in both of the top and the bottom pictures are outlined in white just to make them easier to see from the air. The second largest cluster, commonly referred to as the Marching Bears, and you can probably see why, was constructed along a ridge high above the river. Though effigy mounds themselves are generally only a few feet in height, you can see from the person standing next to the ones in the center image, their view from the air and the sheer numbers of them makes them incredibly stunning. Moreover, though signified differently, these mounds seem to represent a continuation of the belief system that was clearly identifiable in the preceding Hopewell culture, suggesting a deep relationship with the spirit world for effigy mound builders as well. In this case, we believe that it's likely that these mounds were arranged in clusters emphasizing a certain animal, representing perhaps clan totems, and maybe having been built to honor that creature and/or lay claim to a particular territory. Though not nearly as beautiful or as elaborate as Hopewell artifacts, pottery, stone tools, and food remains have been found alongside these effigy mounds, and they indicate that people congregated near them to hold ceremonies that involved building the mounds and burying the dead. As is always true, these events would also have provided the opportunity to celebrate kinship bonds, to establish cooperative relationships with members of other groups, and to create wider social cohesion. Around the same time as the effigy mounds were being built in the upper Mississippi Valley, a new form of monumental construction was becoming popular in the central and lower valleys. In general, around 8700, we see a shift in the lower valley from the construction of relatively small, round-topped mounds used for burial of the dead to much larger, flat-topped platform mounds primarily used as foundations for structures. These platform mounds were not randomly arranged, but were often carefully laid out in rectangular groups with central open plazas between them. So they go from being conical mounds randomly arranged to being platform mounds arranged in very specific ways. This shift in mound form and arrangement takes place alongside parallel shifts from a primarily hunting and gathering lifestyle to subsistence based largely on corn agriculture.